is a beautiful day. And I was just thinking,
oh, yeah.
That listener from last time, the one who said we were completely wrong about, well, everything. Still nothing. Not a single follow-up. Just crickets.
Yeah. Well, maybe some people are just, they're looking to complain, not actually have a discussion.
Guess so.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are in the world, Sip&Talkers, and welcome back to Sip&Talk. So today we are going to wrestle with a quote that is, it is just exploding on social media right now.
Oh, I've seen it everywhere.
It's being treated like this golden rule for how to handle, everything from your boss to international politics.
Yeah.
And the quote, when you translate it, is basically this. When you have strength, the gangster will start reasoning with you.
It's so cynical, but it has this kind of raw power to it, doesn't it? It just feels true in your gut.
It does. It suggests that strength is like the only thing that really matters. And what we want to do today is really take apart that logic and see if it actually holds up.
Yeah.
Especially now in 2026 with AI and, everything being so connected.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people feel that way, that if you're not strong enough, talking about laws or morality is just, it's pointless.
Like you're just talking to a brick wall.
Right. So does that mean that soft power is just dead? Is it obsolete?
Well, what you're describing, that's a classic international relations framework.
Classical realism, right?
Exactly. And the foundational idea of realism is that the world operates in an anarchic state.
And we should probably clarify that term because anarchy makes people think of, chaos and fires in the street.
Right. It's not that kind of anarchy. In this context, it just means there's no world government. There's no global authority that can actually enforce the rules on everybody.
No world police.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If you and I have a fight on the street, eventually the police might show up.
Right.
But if two countries have a fight, there's no one to call. There's no international 911 that sends a global army.
Unless one country's fist is just so much bigger than the others.
Precisely. And that leads us right to the core idea we're testing today. If reason is all about dividing up interests, who gets what, then strength is the ticket you need just to get into the room where that division happens.
So when the power's unequal, the strong guy defines what's reasonable, and the weak guy just has to accept it.
It's a cold world view. And yeah, we've seen some of that logic from certain American political figures recently, that sort of transactional approach. But maybe that's a whole other show we should do if you all are interested.
For sure. But today, let's stick to the quote and its implications.
Which brings us to the title of our show today, Feeding the Wolf. Why concessions only lead to the abyss. Let's get into it.
All right.
So, to really see if this quote holds water, we can't just go on gut feelings. We need to look at what's actually happening around the world.
Yeah, look at the data.
Right, so we pulled a ton of stuff. UN documents, BBC analyses, U.S. State Department reports, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And the pattern is, well, it's undeniable. This idea of bullying the weak and fearing the strong is basically how the world works when power isn't balanced.
And what's so striking is that it's not just one country or one type of government. It's a pattern you see over and over again throughout history.
Which suggests it's structural. It's built into the system because of that lack of a world police force we talked about.
So where do we start?
Let's start with a really clear modern example.
Yeah?
China's dual approach in the South China Sea.
Ah, the two faces. I've read about this. It's stark.
It really is. On the one hand, you have this incredibly aggressive bullying of weaker nations.
Countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia.
Exactly. The State Department reports from the last few years are full of this stuff. We're talking about high-powered water cannons aimed at fishing boats, ramming Coast Guard vessels.
And building up these massive military bases on artificial islands.
The whole point is to just push the smaller countries out of their own waters, to stop them from fishing or looking for oil.
It's a slow-motion takeover. I think I saw a quote from former President Obama back in 2015 where he basically said China was using its sheer size and muscle to push other countries around.
And that's still the official U.S. assessment, that they use intimidation to undermine other countries' rights. It's just straight-up power politics.
Okay, so that's face number one, bullying the weak. What's the other face?
The other face is the fearing the strong part. The way they behave toward the United States or Japan or India.
It's a completely different playbook.
Totally different. When a U.S. warship patrols the area, they're cautious. They shadow them, but they don't ram them.
And with Japan in the East China Sea, it's all this tense diplomacy. Or with India on the border, it's standoffs, but it's not all-out war.
Exactly. They avoid direct military conflict with anyone who can hit back and hit back hard. The moment there's a real threat of high costs, the whole strategy shifts from coercion to negotiation.
Or at least to those gray zone tactics, things that are just below the level of starting a real war.
Right. So it perfectly proves the quote, when you're weak, you get bullied. When you're strong, the bully is forced to sit down and reason with you because a fight would be too expensive for everyone.
Let's rewind the clock a bit. This isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, the classic textbook case has to be Nazi Germany and the appeasement era.
Well, absolutely. This is the ultimate example of why feeding the wolf is such a terrible idea. And the first meal on the menu was Czechoslovakia.
So Hitler had already taken Austria in 1938, the Anschluss, and nobody really did anything.
Right. He got away with it. So they just made him bolder. Next, he turned to Czechoslovakia and demanded the Sudetenland.
And his excuse was that he was protecting the ethnic Germans living there.
A classic pretext. And here's where the whole feeding the wolf thing goes wrong. Britain and France. They were terrified of another major war.
Understandably.
So they chose a strategy of appeasement. They met with Hitler in Munich, and they gave him what he wanted. They sacrificed Czechoslovakia's sovereignty to avoid a war.
The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, flew home waving that piece of paper, saying he'd achieved peace for our time.
And it was a catastrophe. It was a deliberate surrender. What they gave away wasn't just land. Czechoslovakia had a huge arms industry. Those factories ended up building weapons for the Nazis.
So the concession didn't bring peace, it just made the enemy stronger for the war that was coming anyway.
Exactly. The bullying only stopped when Germany was finally facing the combined massive strength of the Allied forces. The US, the Soviet Union, all of them. Again, the pattern holds.
And we see it today, too, in Europe with Russia's policy towards its neighbors.
It's the same dual-track system. Towards countries that are not in NATO, who are perceived as weaker, the approach is incredibly aggressive.
Like Georgia in 2008.
Or, more obviously, Ukraine, starting with Crimea 2014, and then the full invasion in 2022.
They use military force, they support separatist groups, they use energy as a weapon.
All classic power plays against nations that they know can't really fight back on their own. But then you look at how they act toward NATO members.
Poland, the Baltic states.
Totally different. They avoided direct invasion at all costs.
Because of Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all.
Right. An attack on Latvia is an attack on the United States. So instead of tanks, they use nuclear threats, disinformation, cyber attacks.
All things designed to cause trouble without crossing that red line that would trigger a massive, unified military response.
The entire strategy is dictated by the strength of the opponent's defenses.
And you could even go back further to something like the British Empire.
Oh, for sure. The pattern is centuries old. When it came to their colonies in India or Africa, it was pure domination. Military conquest, unequal treaties.
There was no reasoning, it was just force.
But back in Europe, dealing with other strong powers like France or Germany, it was all about complex diplomacy, alliances, the balance of power.
Because a war with France would be devastatingly costly, but a war in some distant colony, not so much.
So the takeaway from all this history is pretty clear. This isn't just a cynical quote. It's a description of how the international system often works. When a country is weak and alone, it gets pushed around. When it gets strong, or finds strong allies,
the bully is forced to change their tune and start reasoning. But here's the question for 2026. What does strength even look like now? It's not just about armies anymore.
That is the perfect question. Because if we accept this realist framework, then the biggest mistake you can make today is having an outdated definition of what strength is.
So if we agreed that you need deterrence just to get someone to talk to you seriously,
then we have to understand that reasoning only happens when both sides feel like the cost of a conflict is just too high. And calculating that cost is way more complicated now.
For sure. Military spending is still going up everywhere, so countries obviously still believe in traditional strength.
Of course. You need that as a baseline. But the real game is being played in these new dimensions of power.
Okay, let's break some of those down. What's first?
First, you've got economic strength. And this is way more than just having a big economy.
It's about leverage.
It's totally about leverage. It's the ability to hit a country with financial sanctions that cut it off from the world. It's controlling the patents for critical technology. It's controlling the choke points in the supply chain.
You can cause more damage by cutting off access to your market than you could with an airstrike in some cases.
Absolutely. Then there's the second dimension, which is getting more important every day. Cognitive strength, or what people call narrative power.
The power of the story.
Exactly. It's the ability to define who's the good guy and who's the bad guy on the world stage.
Because if you can convince the world you're the victim, you get allies, you get aid, you get sanctions placed on your enemy.
You can win the war before it even starts, just by winning the information war. It's a massive form of strength that doesn't require a single soldier.
And that brings us to the third one, which is kind of terrifying. AI, compute power.
In 2026, this is becoming the ultimate measure of national power. The reports we're seeing suggest that whoever masters artificial general intelligence, or AGI, has an almost insurmountable advantage.
You could theoretically paralyze a country without firing a shot.
Think about it. A cyber attack that shuts down their power grid, their financial markets, their communication systems.
The physical battle almost doesn't matter if you can just turn off your opponent's entire country from a keyboard halfway around the world.
It completely changes the calculation of what a conflict would cost.
And the best real-world example of this multidimensional strength has to be the Silicon Shield in Taiwan.
It's a perfect case study. TSMC's dominance in making the most advanced semiconductors isn't just a business story. It's a core part of their national security strategy.
They control a choke point that the entire global economy depends on.
Right. So any discussion about Taiwan's future isn't just about politics or history anymore. It's about whether the world is going to have access to the chips that run everything from your phone to a fighter jet.
The stability of the global supply chain is now the reason that forces everyone else to come to the table and talk.
It creates this kind of uncomfortable but very powerful dependency.
It's like saying, you literally can't afford for me to fail, so you have to help me. It's brilliant in a way.
So if this is all true, why is this quote so popular? What nerve is it touching in people?
I think it speaks to that feeling of powerlessness that everyone has felt at some point.
Yeah.
Whether it's at work with a bad boss or seeing some injustice in society, you feel like talking and being reasonable doesn't work. And you're left thinking, well, I guess I'm just not strong enough to make them listen.
It's an acceptance of the law of the jungle.
Yeah.
But it's also a motivator, isn't it?
Yeah, it doesn't just make you cynical. It makes you think, okay, then I need to get stronger. It pushes you to improve yourself, to gain skills, to save money. Whatever it takes to get to a point where you can't be ignored.
But,
yeah,
and this is a huge but, there's a massive risk baked into this whole mindset.
The security dilemma.
Exactly. If everyone believes that the only way to be safe is to get stronger, what happens?
An endless arms race. I build a bigger wall, so you build a bigger ladder, you get a new missile, so I have to get a better missile defense system.
And every single move you make to make yourself feel more secure makes your neighbor feel less secure.
Which forces them to respond, which makes you feel less secure again. It's this vicious cycle.
It's exhausting. It's incredibly expensive. And it pushes everyone closer and closer to the edge of a conflict that will be way more destructive because everyone has spent decades arming themselves to the teeth.
So strength might be the ticket to the conversation, but if it's the only thing anyone values, the whole system just becomes a tinderbox waiting for a spark.
Which brings us to the next logical question. If we're in this strength-obsessed system, what happens when someone tries to be civilized and makes a concession?
You try to be the adult in the room. You give a little ground to try and de-escalate things.
And why does that so often backfire and just make things worse? Why does feeding the wolf just make it hungrier?
You had that analogy from the business world, right? Where if one company pulls out of a market to focus its resources.
The predator-competitor doesn't see that as a smart strategic move. They see it as weakness. They see an empty space and they rush in to fill it.
It's an invitation to attack.
Exactly. And in international politics, a non-reciprocal concession, where you give something up for free, hoping for goodwill, is read as a giant flashing sign that says, I'm weak, or I'm losing my resolve.
The predator doesn't see it as a peace offering. They see a target.
And to really understand why, we need to dig into the psychology behind this behavior.
Okay.
The first factor is this idea of hierarchical order and social Darwinism. In some cultures, there's a very deep-seated belief that the world isn't made up of equals. There's just a hierarchy.
There's who's on top and who's on the bottom.
Right. And when you mix that with this idea of survival of the fittest, you get a foreign policy that acts very differently depending on who it's dealing with.
We see that, right? Towards a strong power like the U.S., there's incredible patience, even when they're hit with things like tax sanctions.
They adapt, they invest, they play the long game. But towards a country they see as weaker, like Lithuania or the Philippines,
it's immediate high-pressure tactics. economic punishment, military intimidation.
The response is calibrated entirely to their assessment of the other side's strength. If you can't hit back, the pressure just keeps increasing.
The second factor is historical trauma. This explains so much of the distrust towards the so-called rules-based international order.
Think about it. If your national story is defined by a century of humiliation, where you believe that stronger Western powers used international law as a tool to bully and exploit you,
then why on earth would you trust those same rules now that you're the one with the power?
You wouldn't. The logic becomes, the rules were used against us when we were weak. Now that we're strong, we get to make the rules. They see it as correcting a historical wrong.
So any appeal to that old order is just seen as hypocrisy.
Which leads us to the concrete tactic this enables: salami slicing.
This is how concessions actually lead you to the abyss, step by step.
It's a brilliant and insidious strategy. You don't do one big thing that would cause a war. You do 100 tiny things, each one too small on its own to seem worth fighting over.
You take one little slice of the salami, and if nobody stops you,
you take another and another. You're constantly testing the boundaries, and if there's no pushback, you learn that the boundary can be moved.
We saw this happen in real time with the militarization of the South China Sea.
Perfectly. It started with just a few small structures on reefs. Then they started dredging. Then they added buildings, then runways, then radar systems.
And at every single step, the international community would sort of wait and see or issue a protest, but not actually do anything to stop it.
And every one of those moments of inaction was a reward. It was a signal to the aggressor that their strategy was working and they should continue. It creates this feedback loop of aggression.
So let's just break it down. If you make an active concession, give up some ground, the other side sees it as weakness and just demands more next time.
Right. If you show ambiguity or you seem uncertain, they see it as a lack of will, and they start testing you with more gray zone actions to find your breaking point.
But if you show a clear demonstration of strength, a credible deterrent,
that's the only signal that's interpreted as the cost of conflict is too high. And that's what forces them back to the negotiating table. It forces them to reason.
So reason isn't the start of the process. It's the end result of a power calculation.
Which sets up this fundamental conflict, this clash of civilizations, really.
Between the ideal view that we should reason with everyone, even the weak, and the power reality we've just been describing.
It's a clash over the meaning of the word civilization itself.
Okay, so let's start with the ideal of civilization, the rules-based order.
The whole foundation of that system, things like the UN Charter, is the principle of sovereign equality.
Meaning your size or your army doesn't determine your rights?
Exactly. It's designed specifically to protect small countries from getting swallowed up by big ones. And we see this ideal in action when countries advocate for, say, Taiwan's participation in the World Health Organization.
The argument is that their contribution matters, regardless of their political status. It's about function over raw power.
Right. But then you smash that ideal up against the power reality view.
And the problem is that the two sides aren't even starting from the same definition of reason.
Not even close. For a power like Beijing, reason is based on their interpretation of history and a claim to sovereignty that they see as non-negotiable. It's fixed.
Whereas for democracies, reason is based on the current reality, on public opinion, on the right of people to determine their own future.
It's a fundamental fault line. You can't have a reasonable discussion when you don't even agree on what reason is.
Which brings us back to that terrifying analogy of the gangster and the beautiful woman.
It's the perfect illustration of recondition-based bullying.
The gangster says, first, admit you are my wife. Then, and only then, can we talk about what we're having for dinner.
The desired outcome unification, in this case, is made into the non-negotiable starting point for any dialogue. The conversation itself is framed as an act of generosity from the strong party.
And if the weaker party refuses the premise, they get accused of being the unreasonable one, of being the provocateur. It's classic gaslighting.
Exactly. You're causing trouble simply by refusing to agree that you've already been conquered. It's an impossible situation.
And to understand the legal argument they use to justify this precondition, we have to talk about UN Resolution 2758.
Yes. For decades, Beijing has presented this 1971 resolution as the final word, the legal cornerstone that proves Taiwan is part of China.
Their interpretation is that when the UN voted to give China's seat to the People's Republic of China, it legally settled the sovereignty question for good.
But, and this is critical for you to understand, The rest of the world is starting to publicly push back on that interpretation. There's a massive international fact check happening right now.
So what did the resolution actually say?
The original text is very simple. It only says to expel the representatives of Chiang Kai-shek, the Republic of China, and give the seat to the PRC. That's it.
It doesn't even mention the word Taiwan.
Never. It says nothing about Taiwan's sovereignty. It solved a representation problem. Who gets to sit in China's chair? Not a territorial problem.
And this isn't some secret legal theory anymore.
No. In the last year or two, you've had the U.S. State Department, the Dutch Parliament, the European Parliament, all issuing public statements saying very clearly that Resolution 2758 does not determine Taiwan's sovereignty.
That's a huge shift. They're basically dismantling the gangsters' premise. They're saying, we only decided who gets the chair. We didn't sign a marriage contract for you.
It's a direct challenge to that whole framework of precondition-based bullying.
So if the international legal argument is shaky, why is this power logic still so effective inside the PRC?
Two big reasons. First, the grand narrative. The idea of national revitalization is emotionally and politically powerful, and it's been tied completely to the idea of unification. It's presented as a moral duty.
A historical mission.
Exactly. And second, that historical sadness we talked about. The genuine belief that they are righting the wrongs of the past, and if that requires force, then so be it, because that's how the West treated them.
It's a profound collision of two worldviews, one based on historical claims and power, the other based on current democracy and international law.
And that really brings us to our final takeaways.
So to wrap all this up, the uncomfortable truth seems to be that the viral quote is, well, it's pretty accurate as a description of how the world often works. You have to have strength in all its modern forms just to get a seat at the table.
But, and this is the most important part, true civilization is a choice. It's the decision not to use your overwhelming power. The real sign of confidence and strength is having the power to crush someone, but choosing to sit down and talk as equals instead.
And the point of talking about all this isn't to make everyone feel hopeless. It's to be clear-eyed. You can't build security on wishful thinking. You have to build it by creating a situation where even the strong don't dare to break the rules because the consequences are just too high for them too.
Right. We have to accept the gap between the world as it is and the world as we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
But just having these public conversations, just challenging these old interpretations of international law, that itself is progress.
And we have to remember the lesson of appeasement. Real peace comes from a stable power balance. Giving in to pressure doesn't buy you peace. It just rewards the bully and ensures they'll be back for more later. Holding the line is the only responsible choice.
So the provocative thought we'll leave you with, Sip&Talkers, is this. If strength is what makes the gangster talk to you, what form of strength is it that ensures the gangster will talk to you fairly?
Something for you to chew on. We really hope this deep dive gave you some clarity. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please, you know the drill, hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review for the Sip&Talk podcast.
And you should definitely go check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel. It's called Mickey to Life.
Yeah.
He does some really fun memes and some great travel vlogs.
Yeah, Mickey's great. He's been doing his channel for years. He's an old-timer compared to us. I heard he's even taking media courses now to improve his editing skills. The guy is so dedicated. Go give his videos a look.
For sure. We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.